Traveling extensively for work across the country, I've spent countless nights in hotels, but none left as lasting an impression as the unsettling experience I had at a seemingly ordinary hotel. My job took me to Pineville, a small town in Alabama. I was traveling there for the first time. I saw different hotels listed online, and after some distance calculations, I spotted a hotel closest to my workplace. I was tired from continuous travel for months, just going with the flow and not thinking things through. I found this hotel called Sunnyside Inn, near the train station, a big mall, and closest to my workplace. The hotel was listed only on Google and not on any other travel websites. The reviews were okay, and the room pictures looked fine. It seemed like a great deal, so I reserved it right away. After a 3-hour drive from the airport in Birmingham, I arrived at the hotel exhausted and ready to crash. During check-in, I noticed the manager kept staring at me with a curious expression. He asked me several times if I was traveling alone and my reason for being there. I brushed it off, thinking he must not see many solo travelers in this small town. I smiled and politely answered his questions. I booked a room for 3 nights and paid him some money in advance. Before handing me the keys, the manager said, "Okay, let me make it clear. I won't allow anyone to come to your room upstairs." I replied that I wasn't expecting any visitors. He didn't seem interested in my response and kept repeating the same thing. I was a bit annoyed but took the keys and headed to my room. I found the bedding was dirty, so I asked for it to be changed. They did, but it wasn't much better. After relaxing for a bit, I went out and returned in the evening. As I collected my keys, the manager again repeated his no visitors policy. This time, I was irritated and told him coldly that I wasn't expecting anyone. Angrily, I stomped off to my room. I fell asleep watching TV, but I was abruptly awakened by loud banging on my door around 2 a.m. Confused, I wondered why anyone would be banging on my door at this hour. There was no peephole for me to check who it was. Fearful of potential danger, I shouted, "Who is it? What's happening?" The response came, "It's the police, open the door." Feeling a mix of confusion and adrenaline, I reluctantly prepared to open the door, unsure of what awaited me. I switched on the lights and opened the door to find 5 police officers with the manager waiting outside. It was difficult to see their faces in the dimly lit corridor. The senior officer began questioning me suspiciously about my name, purpose of visit, and who I was planning to meet. Despite feeling intimidated, I answered confidently. One of the junior officers added a patronizing remark about verifying my information. I remained composed, confident in my innocence. After a tense few minutes, they apologized and left. I closed the door, but it took me hours to process the situation and its potential danger. I realized I was the only guest in the hotel, and the manager's behavior suddenly seemed much more sinister. Unable to sleep, I packed my bags at dawn and went downstairs. The manager, smiling as if nothing had happened, asked where I was going. I couldn't believe his audacity and quickly checked out, refusing to stay another minute in that unsettling place. Embarrassed and shaken, I resolved never to settle for cheap accommodations without thorough research. The incident served as a stark reminder to prioritize safety above all else when traveling alone. If you search for Sunnyside Inn on Google, you'll see my review about the experience. Unfortunately, it seems they haven't improved much since then. It was 2010. One of my cousin's sisters, her birthday is on April 14th, and at the same time, my wife's birthday falls on April 18th. So Mike, my brother-in-law, and I planned a trip to Lake Tahoe in California from April 13th to April 19th. Since we were in Los Angeles, Lake Tahoe is one of the most popular destinations in the western United States. We took a train on April 13th, 2010, to Truckee Station, which was at the foothills of Lake Tahoe. We arrived at Truckee in the morning and then hired a local car and proceeded to Lake Tahoe. Mike was adamant that we should stay only at the Tahoe View Lodge, which is a government-owned accommodation. Our driver, Mr. Nate, was friendly and suggested a few hotels to stay, but Mike insisted on sticking to Tahoe View Lodge. When we reached there, it wasn't up to par, so we decided to check out a few other hotels as Nate had suggested. We found a hotel on Zoo Road, called Lakeview Inn, about a mile away from the main strip. As expected, we found the perfect cottage with 2 bedrooms, a loft, a terrace, a lake view, a living room, a kitchen, 2 bathrooms, all newly constructed. It was an awesome place, and the unique thing was that this property was separate from the main hotel building, about 100 steps away. Now, as Lake Tahoe is one of the most popular destinations in the western U.S., many of us had visited there multiple times. So, we requested Nate to take us to lesser-known spots that only locals knew about. We headed to Emerald Bay, a few miles from Lake Tahoe. On the way, there was an old cemetery dating back to the late 1700s and early 1800s. It was beautifully designed on a hilltop, with hundreds of graves of settlers. It was peaceful, surrounded by greenery, and had a slightly eerie atmosphere. Despite this, Nate suggested we visit, and since we were there for adventure, we went ahead. It was a historic and stunning place, with only a couple of other families like us visiting. However, because we had 2 babies with us, one being my 17-month-old son and my cousin's baby who was only 6 months old, my cousin decided to stay in the car while we explored. After a while, some of us started feeling uneasy. My wife, my younger cousin's sister, and even my brother began complaining of feeling unwell. We decided to leave, attributing our discomfort to the eerie atmosphere of the graveyard. When we returned to the hotel in the evening, we changed into more comfortable clothes and began our evening activities. We played cards, listened to music, danced, and enjoyed some drinks before dinner. As we were discussing our plans for the next day before going to bed, the electricity suddenly went out in our cottage. It was 11:20 p.m., and we initially thought it would come back on soon, but as time passed and it didn't return, we became concerned. By midnight, my sister tried calling the reception, but there was no answer. I went to the reception area and found it deserted. Even the gatekeeper was missing. This was highly unusual for a 3-star property, especially at that hour. I checked the kitchen area, the parking lot, and every corner of the hotel, but there was no sign of any staff. It felt like a ghost town or a haunted hotel. When I knocked on the owner's house, there was no response despite repeated attempts. The fear began to set in, especially with 2 babies in tow. Fortunately, my elder cousin's sister had 2 rechargeable emergency lights in her bag, which provided some light in one room. When I returned to the cottage, I didn't share the situation with everyone immediately, knowing it would cause panic among the ladies. Instead, I discussed it with Mike and my younger brother. As the night progressed, we noticed strange occurrences in the cottage. Windows seemed to shatter one by one, and we felt the presence of some supernatural force. It was the longest and most unsettling night of our lives. None of us slept, and both babies were restless and crying throughout the night. We all felt as though we were being watched, and the children seemed particularly affected by whatever presence was there. In the morning, when I confronted the owner about the previous night's events, he calmly explained that there had been an electrical issue affecting only our cottage, and the staff had left early due to a shift change. He apologized for the inconvenience but didn't offer any further explanation. I didn't find closure from that night, but it left a lasting impact on all of us. I didn't share this experience with anyone for fear of spreading misconceptions about the place. However, 2 years later, during a family gathering, Mike shared a similar experience he had at the same hotel, in the same cottage, just 6 months prior. It confirmed to us that there was indeed some supernatural presence in that cottage, and our experience wasn't merely our imagination.